Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet. Joining me in studio, your other host, Captain Ron. We have a great show for you guys today. We have the best-selling author, Christopher Dunn, who wrote the book, The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt, and many other books that you can choose from. Christopher Dunn is an engineer with over 35 years' experience, and in 1969, he was recruited by an aerospace company. But his Pyramid Odyssey began in 1977 when he read the book, Secrets of the Great Pyramid. And in his conclusion was, they're giant machines. And discovering the purpose of this machine involved a process of reverse engineering that has taken over 24 years of research. And we're excited to have Christopher Dunn with us today. Please welcome to Truth Be Told, Christopher Dunn. Oh, the man, the myth is with us today, Mr. Christopher Dunn. How you doing? You doing all right?
Doing great.
Great. Well, we are excited. Captain Ron is not in studio because of those mountain climbing incident that he had in the Indies. But we are glad, right? But we are glad and honored to have Christopher Dunn in the studios of Truth Be Told, because this is one of our favorite subjects. And Ron, I'm going to go ahead and let you take the first question, because I know you're even a bigger fan than I am.
Yes, Tony, thanks. Mr. Dunn, it's such an honor to have you here. We'd love you to just kind of give a little recap, if you would, for our audience about how your feelings are on what the Great Pyramid is. I know you wrote your first book nearly 20 years ago now, and it changed the perception of certainly what I thought the Great Pyramid was. Could you kind of give us an outline of what your position is on the Great Pyramid?
Sure. And thank you. I appreciate the invitation to speak this evening. Actually, it's interesting. It's 2017 now, and when I started to research the Great Pyramid, it was 1977. So that was 40 years ago when I first got the idea that the Great Pyramid, because of its size, its precision, and the architecture. It seemed to me to look more like a machine than a building for human habitation, whether it was a tomb or a temple, or even some people have theorized that it was a chamber or temple of initiation. So it's a highly unusual structure. And of course, there's more known about it now because of the beauty of the internet and the dissemination of information. There is more information available for people to access to learn about the Great Pyramid and its the details of the Great Pyramid and the other pyramids too. However, the Great Pyramid back in the 70s was the focus of most of the books that were being written at that time. And the one book that got my attention was Secrets of the Great Pyramid by Peter Tompkins. And that's what actually inspired me to start digging into the question, because the theme throughout Tompkins' book was not necessarily the pyramid as a tomb, but all the questions that other researchers had posed about other purposes for the Great Pyramid, because there seemed to be an overriding belief that the tomb theory was not supported by the evidence. And in any pursuit, whether it's in science, archaeology, in our lives, we should always seek the truth, and generally the truth can be found when you have access to good information, good evidence, and you have the skills, or you gather around you people who have the skills to interpret that evidence. And so for me, the skills that I had gathered up until that time was actually in manufacturing engineering, and so I had worked in manufacturing. I'd worked as an apprentice in England for a number of years, and then I emigrated to America and worked in the aerospace industry. And I worked as a tool maker and then an engineer, and then also then I managed a laser job shop. So I had some of the requisite skills necessary to look at very precise construction, very precise assemblies, and I looked at the Great Pyramid and some of the details that were brought out by other researchers like William Flinders Petrie spoke to that part of my background, and that was precision engineering. For example, we take just one feature inside the Great Pyramid, which is the descending passage. It's within the thickness of a thumbnail of being absolutely straight over 150 feet. And that is a remarkable precision in a structure that was supposedly built by relatively primitive people, technologically primitive people, compared to uh, us in modern day, or even 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, in the Industrial Revolution. When that started, the features that you find in the pyramid surpassed the features that you would find in any construction that we perform today, or back then. So, when you look for a time in history where you could say, okay, at this point in time, with the most rudimentary tools, we would have been able to build the Great Pyramid. We're still looking for some tools to be able to accomplish it properly in the lifting, being able to lift and position 70-ton blocks of stone, 200-ton blocks of stone, and do it in places that are seemingly inaccessible to modern equipment, and certainly equipment that was in use 100 years ago. Now, there are theories, though, I mean, that have addressed those questions, but theories are theories, and it's when you actually perform the work and try to accomplish some of them, that's where people tend to get stuck, because it's hard to imagine hauling a 200-ton block up a ramp on wooden rollers with using nothing but manual labor,
Right.
and then you have to ask the question, just how long do they propose that it took to build the Great Pyramid using these methods, and even those conclusions or theories tend to fall apart when you do a good, thorough cost analysis, and trying to work up a time frame for doing even some of the simpler tasks, such as today cutting in quarries is I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's certainly well practiced, and it has been used successfully for decades. Uh, and so when you ask the question, how long would it take to build the Great Pyramid? If we actually ask the question, how long would it take to quarry the stone and deliver enough stone to build the Great Pyramid? Then you have a document that was produced by a gentleman by the name of Merle Bucker, who was the director of the Indiana Limestone Institute, in Bedford, Indiana, and he was asked to prepare a quotation for the length of time uh, it would take to deliver enough stone to build the Great Pyramid. He came back and he said that with using all 33 limestone quarries in and around Bedford, Indiana, um, it would take them, and if they triple production, so they're working round the clock now, it would take them 27 years just to quarry and deliver the stone.
Wow.
And so, it's just an enormous structure. It covers 13 acres, and when you are actually climbing the Great Pyramid, which I did, uh, I found out that it was illegal afterwards, but
Good for you.
after when I got down, oh, you shouldn't have done that. It's not allowed. Oh, really? But so that's why we went up at midnight, right?
Right. Well, Christopher, I want to ask a question real quick. And,
Yeah.
you being an engineer and your first time when you're walking to the Great Pyramid, I mean, it looks very jagged. The rocks are, the wear and tear of it. When did you finally start realizing that this could be been used, machines used to create this? Because, like I said, when you just walk up on it, it doesn't look like smooth and
Right.
precise.
Right. Today, when you look at the core masonry of the Great Pyramid, you can see that it's not as precise as what Petrie described in his book. But he was describing the casing stones. So when he described the casing stones of the Great Pyramid, he said that they were cut within 10,000ths of an inch.
Wow.
And over 75 square inches, and they were fitted together line to line, or so that they actually butted up, or there was a 20,000ths of an inch gap.
Right.
So he went from 0 to 20,000, and then there was some kind of a cement that was used on the casing stones that when he had it analyzed, they couldn't determine the composition of it. I'm not sure if that would be the case today, but I don't think anybody's tried in the last 10, 20 years.
Well, you're talking about the precision there of 20,000th of an inch. Can you talk some more about some of the precision that you personally have found at the Great Pyramid? I know I've seen you there with your tools and inside the Grand Gallery and inside the King's Chamber, how insanely polished that is and how precise and square that is. I mean, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's it. What happened, my research kind of unfolded over a long period of time, and it actually developed through a series of visits to Egypt. And my first visit to Egypt was in 1986, and so it was a matter of observation. And in 1986, I went there just to kind of confirm some of the information that I'd read in the literature. I wanted to be able to look at it with my own eyes to verify what I was reading was correct, because I'd already developed a rough idea on what the pyramid was about, other than the tomb theory, and so I just wanted to confirm that. But I didn't take any tools over with me because I wasn't expecting to find what I found, and that was an even higher order of precision than what Petrie had described. And so I was looking at these granite blocks, not necessarily inside the King's Chamber for sure, inside the second pyramid, in Khafre's pyramid. The granite box there is extremely precise, but I couldn't determine that in 1986 because I didn't have the instruments to do so. And so, but I was observing these granite blocks on the outside of the Great Pyramid, outside of the second pyramid on the Giza Plateau, and it kind of registered with me that it would be useful to find out just they looked very precise, but without actually, checking them, I didn't know. And so filed that in my memory banks and came back to the States, got on with my life, and the opportunity to go back to Egypt didn't come until another 9 years later in 1995. That time I was invited to be in a documentary with Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval and John Anthony West. They were producing a documentary, and it was kind of supportive of Hancock's work, Fingerprints of the Gods, which he was in. I think he was in galleys at the time when I was there in February of 1995, and the book was published later that year. But so that was a perfect opportunity for me. I had a paid trip over there, and they put me up in the hotel and paid my expenses. I was great, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And at the same time, I packed a few tools to check out some things. One was a straight edge, another one was a contour gauge. I had radius gauges and some forming wax because I was interested in the uniformity of corner radii. I was interested in the geometry, the contour of the southern shaft, the opening of the southern shaft, and the flatness. And I took a square too, a toolmaker's square, which was a very precise instrument, because I was observing that there were actually blocks that had some surfaces that appeared to be square to each other. So with those instruments, I was able to verify my observations in 1986, and then some of the things that the information I had hoped to gather, I wasn't able to. For instance, the opening in the King's Chamber to the southern shaft,
right,
which is a rather bulbous opening. And if you recall in my book, The Giza Power Plant, I described that as like a microwave horn antenna, but it's like a catcher's mitt, And I wanted to see what kind of a radius we had on the X and Y, but in 1993, Rudolf Gantenbrink, a German robotic engineer, had installed a fan in the mouth of that opening, and so that was inaccessible to me. But the instrument was useful on the Giza Plateau, where there was a contoured block of granite that was quite remarkable, actually. And I wrote about that in the Giza Power Plant, and also in my second book, Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt. And I think I brought it out a little more in Lost Technologies with better photographs and better drawings. But the straight edge was placed inside the coffer in the King's Chamber, commonly known as the sarcophagus, and also in the second pyramid, on the inside of the box in the second pyramid. And what I found there just absolutely blew me away, because from my experience, my life experience, I'm used to running very precise gauges along granite surface plates and feeling the smoothness of a granite surface plate. And I certainly didn't expect to find the same thing in Egypt, in an object that was thousands of years old, to have something that precise. And right. It's like, well, is it possible that it could be that precise? I shone a flashlight behind it to see if any light was leaking through, and it was just dead flat. And moving the straight edge along, I didn't find any variation in it. So it was vertically and horizontally.
That's great. That's amazing.
It was dead flat. So
Do you think of the technology we have today? What is it the most similar to the cuts that are most similar to what we have today? Laser or
Diamond.
Diamond? What do you think it's most similar to if we used that today?
yeah, well, the laser is not the tool to cut granite. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
granite would just laugh at a laser because it's a well, I mean,
Tony.
I know.
eh,
You know.
well, I mean, if you had a powerful enough laser, you could melt some material
Right.
and
Right.
do some damage, but you're not going to get very very smooth and precise surfaces with it. So you can forget about laser. Lasers are good
Done. Forgot.
for aerospace cutting if you have to cut right through the material. Um, and generally, lasers in aerospace manufacturing, you're using an assist gas. It could be oxygen, it could be air or nitrogen. Uh, but the laser generally has to pass through the material. Uh, it's very difficult, almost impossible to cut cavities, very precise cavities with laser.
Hmm.
Um, I tried that. I mean, there was a project that I was working on when I was in Indianapolis, and that was to try cutting some grooves with a defined depth, and yeah, it was a almost impossible task with the kind of laser that I had. Um, and it's the same with water jet too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people they say, "Oh, well, water jet. That's using abrasive. That would be good." But water jet it's the same thing. It cuts through thicker material, but it has to pass through the material in
Right.
order to be proficient. You're not going to cut a cavity out of a piece of metal using water jet and expect to get an even flat bottom with a precise depth, or the sidewalls and surfaces
Mm-hmm.
smooth or anything like that. That's not going to happen. There are other methods that are more efficient and proficient in producing those geometries. But the diamond, of course, is generally uh, accessed and used for cutting granite because granite has a harder, it's like 7 on the Mohs scale, and diamond is a 10. So, diamond would be the perfect medium to be cutting granite. Especially when you're cutting granite to such precise finishes. Uh, that's how we would do. That's how we do it today. And I would say that emery or granite or diamond would be the mediums to use. Um, Ultrasonic machining would be useful, but then still you do have the hardness of the tool that you have to take into consideration. And generally, if you did ultrasonic, you would have an ultrasonic tool and then use a slurry that would have an emery or a diamond in the slurry to cut the cavities. There are methods available to us to produce those shapes that I've seen in Egypt. And to finish the surfaces with precision. There are some objects that I found in Egypt, or I was shown in Egypt, particularly in the Serapeum, where I actually tried to get a precision granite surface plate manufacturer quote me actually making one of these objects. It was a huge granite box in the Serapeum, which is near Saqqara, the Pyramid of Saqqara. And the Serapeum is an underground complex. They are bedrock tunnels with these vaulted crypts or chambers that are cut into the walls and set down about 3 or 4 feet, and then set into a recess in the middle of the floor is a very, very large granite box with a lid on it. And the granite box weighs about 70 tons, and the lid will probably weigh about 25 tons. They're about 13.5 feet long and 7.5 feet wide. About, I'd say, 8 feet high, with the floor. Somebody who's about 6 foot can stand up in it on the inside. But and those things are amazingly precise and finished. The granite manufacturer or precision finisher came back to me and said that they didn't have the tools to do something like that. That they would have to build it in five. They'd have to build 5 pieces and bolt it together, ship it, and then bolt it together on site to come up with a box like that. I mean, the lid, amazing. Of course, it would be 25 tons, but if you got five huge pieces, and then they will be shipped over ground. They said that the granite itself, this was back in '95. The granite itself would cost about $175,000 before finishing, and then and just the raw block, and then the DOT charges for actually shipping it overland would be astronomical too, because of the weights. So but then you see these, and there's over 22 of these boxes.
Wow. Yeah, but we hear from Egyptologists that this was built, with copper tools and bangers and whatnot. How could they possibly get that kind of precision?
Well, they can't, and that's the answer to that question.
Ron, come on. Now it's your turn.
They can't. If you take anything away from our discussion, this is one of the points that I like to make. Number one, what Egyptologists and archaeologists work with are the evidence that is found within the archaeological record. So whatever they've been able to dig up in and around these pyramids and temples and statues, whatever they've been able to dig up, then that is the culture. That explains. That's the contextual evidence. And with those tools that they have found, they construct their theories on how the pyramids are made, without any thought to whether it's even physically possible to do, and which it's not. But that's not the only thing. They don't address anywhere what these miracle stone workers with their copper chisel, what they use to actually check, to verify that the object they were making was within whatever specifications that they had. And they had to have had specifications, because you don't produce that kind of precision and those kind of geometries by accident. They just don't happen. But if you just set about banging on a box with a stone ball or a copper chisel, it just doesn't happen. And so if you want to prepare a granite box that has parallel sides, square sides, perfectly square, perfectly flat, then you have to have instruments to check it. You have to have instruments to be able to say, okay, I'm achieving the design objectives and the precision that is required on this particular artifact. And these are all logical questions in manufacturing.
But they have no archaeological record of any of these kind of tools or measuring tools, right? No,
they don't. I think the only tools that I've been shown when I go there is a case in the Cairo Museum where they have copper chisels and copper tube drills that they claim were responsible for drilling some of the holes that we see. And that's an entire chapter in my book, the precision of the or the Petrie core number 7, how the ancient Egyptians were able to drill holes in granite so efficiently. But they don't, yeah, they have no answer for the questions that any engineer would have, or engineer or machinist or toolmaker or somebody who is, even an enthusiast who has a shop in their basement or in their garage,
Right.
and does some hobby kind of work, and knows how tools function and what tool marks actually look like, because that's another subject. It's not just you have all the evidence in Egypt. It's not just the precision, which is like, oh, okay, so we have precision. That opens up a whole new discussion on the kind of instruments that they needed to create that precision.
And why? Why?
And why? But then you also have the tool marks that are left on the granite by the tools, the action of the tools, and those are very explanatory and remarkable, and so gathering all of that information builds a totally different picture to what Egyptologists are concentrating on. And it's not that I blame them, or say, oh, why didn't you notice this? Well, how they weren't looking for it. It's not the stream that they swim in. They've been trained in a particular discipline, and that's their stream. They're not going out of that particular stream. It's like the echo chamber. They're talking to people who have been through the same rigors of education that they have, the same books have been read, the
Right.
same, everybody is regurgitating the same authors and researchers, and then that's their world, and I don't disrespect it. I think as I see it now, 20 years on after my book was published, you do have kind of there was an attempt to engage with Egyptologists and archaeologists, and that didn't go very well. And so they continued on their path, and alternate kind of theorists, or those who arrive at a different conclusion, they will continue with their research, and they have an audience for what they find. Now, eventually, I think some of our modern day kind of theorists, they're probably going to fall away or die off. Depends on the strength of their work. If their work has legs, and it will continue on.
Right.
I think into the future it will probably get a little more traction. If it's it depends on what the next generation does too. I'm 71 and I've been at it for 40 years, so it'd be great to have some younger people who are, and there are younger people who are interested in it, but right now it's the field is there's a lot of people out there now who are looking at this.
Well, Chris,
and yep.
No, I want to ask this question because what I find fascinating, we were talking about the tools that they use, but my question is the people, because these had to be master builders. I mean, there's somebody like me. I've tried to build many things in my lifetime, and I've always made mistakes. I'm curious for the people. Were there a lot of mistake drillings? Because do you find those a lot, or was everything very clean?
Well, that's what you do look for, isn't it?
I know. I mean, because I know everything I've ever built, there was something marks that was a mistake.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, that's a very pertinent question, because it's in their mistakes that you find the real truth. the devil's in the details. And it's like, okay, when I'm looking at a piece such as the Ramses statue, and you find a mistake
Right.
on the Ramses statue, and it's like, oh, okay, this is a error. How
Right.
was the error created? And then when you're trying to imagine the conventional theory of how the statue was created, uh, and and then you try to match that with the kind of mistake that there is, it's like, well, that doesn't compute because, if you're doing something by hand, uh, that kind of mistake wouldn't happen. For instance, Petrie pointed out a mistake on the coffer inside the Great Pyramid, and he said that the saw it had run too deep in one area. It left some saw marks, and also the saw had been backed out, and then they
Right.
started over, and then it left a step where it continued on. So you have to ask the question, well, they were using saws, and they were leaving these saw marks on these coffers. Uh, those saws, and even looking at the feed lines of the saw, which were probably about 30 seconds apart, um, you have to ask you, wow, that saw must have been going too quickly for them to realize that they had, that they had cut into the part rather
Mm-hmm.
than the waste. It's going in the direction of their
Right.
object rather than the waste part of it. So there's that. There is a one beautiful example in the British Museum in London, and that's on the Ramses statue, which they got from the Ramesseum. And originally, this was a part of a statue that must have weighed about 1,000 tons, but they brought it to London, and set it up in the British Museum. But I did a study of the Ramses statue for my book, Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, and that is a subject that fascinated me. I was captivated by it because what I detected was a high order of not just precision on the faces of the statue, but symmetry from one side of the face to the other. So you have a jawline where one jawline matches the other jawline very
Right.
precisely. And when you consider that you're looking at a three-dimensional object, and you consider that you have an X, Y, and Z coordinate on one side that matches perfectly with an XYZ coordinate on the other side, and
Right.
those coordinates are changing in all axes as they flow down to the jaw, to the chin. That's a remarkable accomplishment. How do they do that? But but then when you look for evidence, and you look for the evidence in the mistakes, the statue in London, it has uh, a gouge in the corner of the mouth, and in the corner of the mouth, it looks like the tool went too deep.
Mm.
And what they did to try and disguise it or make it less apparent was they cut the lips deeper. Um, and there was a very, very sharp cusp at the vermilion border, where you have the philtrum that comes down
Right.
to the lips, and you have the point on both sides of the philtrum, and you have a very, very, very sharp point, and the lips are cut deeper. It's almost like a step, and you can compare that to the Ramses statue at Luxor, and you can see the difference between the one in the British Museum and the one at Luxor. It's fascinating, really. So when you consider uh, how that may have happened, you have to consider a mechanical assist, or some kind of a machine that that was cutting the face, uh, in the bulk of the face and the contours of the face, and then a secondary operation that created the details of the mouth, which were a much finer detail than, say the overall face, where if you were doing it on a CNC machine, you would have a, fairly robust, larger tool, maybe a ball end mill, going over the face and cutting all the features of the face and just shooting over the lips, and leaving them rounded, and then coming back later and cutting the detail of the lips. But then that smaller tool overshot and cut into the corner of the mouth.
Yeah, I've been showing pictures of the actual statue. So people that are watching on YouTube, you can see that, and people that are listening to our podcast, go check it out. It's very fascinating, and it's a beautiful statue. I mean, a very beautiful statue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Did you get that from my book?
I got it from your book. Yes, I did.
Yeah, the symmetry. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Yeah. Feel free to share that, because I think those things are very important for people to understand. And of course, a picture, you can talk about something all day, but
yeah,
having a photograph of it
makes a big difference.
I think absolutely necessary to fully understand.
Well, I know we only have about 9 minutes left, because you're such a fascinating man. We could talk to you for many hours.
I feel like I've been rambling.
No.
This feels like it's the fastest hour of my
life. I know.
Like.
But one thing I do want to talk about, and you talked about it in your book, and I'm curious you talked about many chambers and passageways were deliberately precision to maximize acoustic qualities. I mean, first of all, as an engineer, why would they care about the acoustics of
a machine?
Of a machine, yeah, it doesn't. That doesn't make sense. It's just somebody that's, with a GED. Right. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, now we delve into the rabbit hole. One of the.
Well, I got my bunny ears on. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. It's a very, very involved and complicated subject, and I don't profess to be an acoustic engineer or even a musicologist. I do play a couple of instruments, but and I have a basic understanding of physics. Certainly not, in depth, and I need I have asked for and received help in interpreting some of the ideas that I've had about the Great Pyramid, and one of those ideas came about because I was trying to find answers for the King's Chamber, and the King's Chamber, which has 5 layers of granite beams above it, is a bit of an enigma. The reasons that Egyptologists give for the granite beams is that they were relieving chambers, or they allowed a flat ceiling to be built for the king in this particular chamber. But that has pretty much been disproven. It's by the building of the Queen's Chamber, which does not have all those layers, and certainly you could add a flat ceiling to that without any problem. But the whole theory of the Great Pyramid was built and developed based on empirical data, anecdotal data, information that was gathered by earlier researchers and their observations. So if you go back to the time of Napoleon, when it comes to acoustics, he, I think, was probably the first one to notice something really unusual about, about the acoustics in the Great Pyramid. Napoleon liked to blow things up, and he used the Sphinx for target practice, right. But he also had asked to be left in alone inside the Great Pyramid at one time. But before his soldiers left, as the story goes, they fired their rifles in the Grand Gallery, and he noted that the sound in the Grand Gallery, the sound of that explosion, it receded off to the distance, but it was like a rolling thunder. So he noted that because it was a very unusual occurrence, evidently, or phenomena for him. And so that's one. Then you have the testimony of the flautist Paul Horn, who recorded inside the Great Pyramid, and he released an album called Inside. He did a couple of albums called Inside the Taj Mahal, Inside the Great Pyramid. I'm not sure any others that he did, but you may know. But his album came with a booklet, and in the booklet he described his experience in each of the chambers and the reverberation, the resonance of the chambers, and also his tuning of his flute within the King's Chamber, and the resonance of the coffer or the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. But the one thing that was interesting that he wrote was when he went out onto the step outside the King's Chamber and looking down the Grand Gallery, and he played his flute, not like the King's Chamber, which was, he got a really excellent reverberation, about 8 seconds in the King's Chamber. It was rather flat outside in the Grand Gallery. But he noted that there was a sound coming from somewhere else. The sound that he was creating, the music he was playing, was bouncing around in the Grand Gallery and resonating in the King's Chamber. So he had a echo or the sound coming from behind him while he was playing his flute. The King's Chamber was acting as some kind of a resonator for the sound in the Grand Gallery. So that's two. And then, of course, you have the testimony and experiences of innumerable visitors to the Great Pyramid who chant inside the King's Chamber, and they do their meditations, and they describe a very otherworldly experience while in there. And so you couple that, the unusual acoustic properties that have been noted, not necessarily thoroughly described scientifically, but then come later, you have the testimony of Tom Danley, who actually took a subwoofer into the King's Chamber and drove the chamber to resonance at around 30 hertz, and scared the crap out of his team who were in there helping him. The crew, he had to shut the subwoofer down because it was getting pretty scary. So he was thumping at around 30 hertz, and the chamber was becoming very active. So you have all of these kind of experiences and and different descriptions of acoustic phenomena within the Great Pyramid, and I thought that kind of dovetailed into my theory of the Great Pyramid being a power plant, or taking energy from the Earth and converting it to microwave energy. And it kind of explained a lot of the other evidence that was available inside the Great Pyramid, throughout the Great Pyramid, with the subterranean chamber,
Right.
the Queen's Chamber, and then the Grand Gallery. Everything kind of fit together.
We could do a full hour on just that, you explaining how it takes the Earth's energy. And I'm so sad to hear that we're
I guess
out
it's
of
going to be
time.
part 2 then.
Yeah, we'll have to chat some more because we're running out of time.
Yeah, well, I'm going back to Egypt next March.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful.
And I will be conducting a tour with a very good friend of mine. His name is Robert Vorter. And Robert Vorter is a sound engineer. He's also an archaeologist. He's got an archaeology degree. And he's been studying the Great Pyramid for decades, too. He also has done some sound tests within the pyramids at Dashur in the Red Pyramid, and gathered some of the acoustic data from the Red Pyramid, and actually wrote some music based on that, which is very fascinating. He's a very knowledgeable guy.
That's awesome.
We'll have to have him on too.
Do I dare ask you if we're going to be blessed with yet a third book? Are you done with that, or is there any chance we could get something else out of you about this?
Well, I can't leave it because when I there has been so much that has come specifically related to the Giza power plant theory. There has been so much activity. No, you wouldn't think any activity because over 20 years things happen. Like okay, in Egypt they call it an Egyptian minute, where you give it a little time and something will happen. We've been waiting to find out what was behind Gantenbrink's door for so long, and there are now there have been some examination, some scans of the pyramid that show that there are additional chambers. And so that's exciting. Some of the experiments that I've done on proving out some of the theories in the Great Pyramid, that's been good. There's a lot of information that I need to update the Giza power plant or write an entirely different or new book. And then the acoustic information that is becoming a little more important to fully develop and explain. That area is amazingly, it's amazing. That structure is mind-blowing. And
we are so thrilled to have you doing this. I got to tell you, right, Tony?
No, please. I wish we could go with you and enjoy the tour with you. I think that would be amazing. So maybe we'll save our pennies and go with you.
Well, that'd be great. I will send you the tour details.
Please do. We'll put it up on our website too. Yeah,
that'd be awesome if you could do that. Yeah.
Well, people go to gizapower.com, and I know we unfortunately we got to get out of here, but please, we want to have you back, and I know you're a busy man, and it's an open invitation, so please come back and spend some more time with us.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
You too.
I appreciate it.
And again, we appreciate people like Christopher Dunn, who put the work in, the research, and definitely put the heart and soul into what we're passionate about. We don't have to do the things that he had to, put himself through, so we appreciate that. So go to truthbetoldwebtv.com and check out upcoming guests. Check out our YouTube channel. We are doing amazing because of you guys that are listening in and people like listening to Christopher Dunn. Please subscribe, leave comments, and we'd love to hear more from you of who you want to have on our show. But until then, I'm Tony Sweet.
Captain Ron.
I was going to say, where you at, Captain Ron? Until then,
I'm right here, buddy.
And next time, we'll talk to you then. Bye.